It's a great honor of mine personally to have worked with Tony Thompson since he's been a board member of the PCOB, and the contributions he has already given to the board, our mission to protect investors, have really been a fun thing for me to experience firsthand working with him. And I so enjoy the time that I'm able to spend with him, and I know that you will too. So with that, Tony Thompson.
Thank you, Kent, for those kind remarks. Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome our participants here today, both in person and online, to the PCLB's fourth in-person forum for 2024 here in Jersey City. I'm pleased to be back with this distinguished group of auditors and audit firms for my third year. In the past 2 years, I've greeted you virtually from the PCOB, so I'm excited to be here in person. And like those before me and those after me, I need to share with you that first, let me say the views I express here today are my own and do not represent those of the staff or the PCOB board. First of all, I'd like to give credit to George Bodick, fellow board member, for coming up with this idea, which I think is a great idea because we look to see how we can engage with small businesses and broker-dealers, outside of the walls of the PCOB. So in 2024, the PCOB expanded the reach and number of small business and broker-dealer forums from one virtual, as I discussed, forum to 5 separate scheduled in-person events in recognition of the vital role that firms that audit smaller businesses and broker-dealers in protecting investors have. Each board member has personally carved out time to speak at these events and meet with the firms and auditors of small businesses and broker-dealers. Many of the small businesses that you audit are critical to the economic infrastructure of our regional and local communities, whether it is manufacturing companies, community banks, benefit plans, emerging growth companies, or small broker-dealers. These businesses steward significant contributions to the health and vibrancy of our economy. By serving as auditors of these businesses, you are serving in a public interest role focused on safeguarding the integrity of not just your local communities, but also our broader U.S. capital markets. When audits are done right, audit firms build trust locally and globally. Small audit firms are the backbone of many segments of our economy. As of September 30th, 2024, there were over 1,500 firms registered with the PCOB, of which 99% of these firms audit fewer than 100 issuers, are inspected triannually, and included in our non-affiliate firm inspection program. As noted in the board's strategic plan, regular and meaningful dialogue with our stakeholders, including audit firms and individual auditors, help us learn about developments in auditing and the capital markets, advances in technology, the effects of our work on stakeholders, and other topics. The board has taken 3 key steps to have regular and meaningful dialogue in support of smaller firm and broker-dealer audits. Number 1, expanded direct engagement, increased delivery of useful guidance, and 3, incorporated scalability throughout the rulemaking process. And you'll hear me talk about scalability often because that is a key focus. So first, we've expanded our direct engagement with firms of smaller issuers and broker-dealers in a number of ways. One way we've accomplished that is ensuring that auditors of smaller issuers and broker-dealers are represented on our Standards in Emerging Issues Advisory Group, which we affectionately call SEAG. The SEAG has held 7 meetings over the past 2 years, including one just recently, November 12th. The topics covered in these meetings have included fraud considerations, firm and engagement metrics, review of certain oversight activities by various PCOB divisions, post-implementation reviews, going concerns, substantive analytical procedures, talent pipeline challenges, the role of artificial intelligence, auditing inventories, and more. The membership of this advisory group brings diverse perspectives that help inform standard setting and rulemaking initiatives. In response to our increased standard setting activity, we've also increased our outreach with various groups, including CAQ's Small Firm Task Force, and added roundtable discussions for certain standard setting projects. Additionally, today's hybrid forum is another example of our desire to engage with auditors of smaller public companies and broker-dealers. We have held these forums across the U.S., reaching auditors from coast to coast, outside of our normal inspection process. For our triennially inspected firms, it may be 2 or 3 years since their most recent inspection, and these forums are a great way to share information regarding inspection trends and good practices. We encourage firms of all sizes to actively engage with us, as these dialogues and encounters can contribute to improved audit quality. Second, our staff has increased delivery of useful guidance. Through our regulatory activities, we have a unique horizontal view of the profession. Our staff has been diligently sharing insights from our inspections and outside outreach activities to help drive audit quality forward. Through our staff inspection spotlights, we inform auditors regarding common deficiencies and good practices, and we communicate our staff inspection priorities. In 2023 and 2024, our staff issued 22 spotlights. That level of guidance and insight is at a pace never seen in our PCOB history. This included a first-time spotlight specifically focused on insights into the PCOB's interim inspection program related to audits of broker-dealers. A key step in expanding our delivery of relevant and informative guidance specific to broker-dealers. Additionally, earlier this month, the staff launched the Audit Focus series, in which publications are focused on auditors of smaller public companies. The common deficiencies and good practice in these documents are specifically derived from our smaller firm audit inspections. In 2024, we have also issued 4 implementation guidance materials, including a webinar related to topics such as Form AP and our QC 1000 implementation. Modernizing our standards also comes with the responsibility of championing effective implementation to maintain high audit quality. As we modernize our standards, the importance of providing adequate and extensive support through the implementation process cannot be overstated. Effective and timely implementation of new standards supports our investor protection mission. Additionally, last month, the staff has issued a supplement to its remediation guidance. The most recent remediation staff guidance was published in 2013. Under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, a firm has 12 months to remediate, to the satisfaction of the board, any quality control deficiencies identified in an inspection report. During that time, a firm can seek feedback from our staff and provide multiple submissions regarding remedial steps it is taking or plans to take. We suggested firms engage early and often in the remediation process. Let's share what early and often looks like. The supplemental remediation guidance recently issued pertains to 1, taking advantage of the full remediation process or period, planning ahead in order to get the benefit of inspection staff feedback. Third, implementing actions early enough to be able to monitor their operation and include in the submission evidence they are effective. Next, considering whether certain quality control criticisms persist due to the influence of non-technical factors, such as a firm's culture. And lastly, understanding the limits of acceptable supplemental submissions after the submission deadline. Supplemental guidance such as this increases our transparency of our process and lends additional support to auditors. I encourage all auditors to include consumption of the training on our staff guidance as part of their efforts to improve audit quality. Third area I'd like to cover is, where appropriate, we are making our standards and rules scalable. And I shared with you, you'll hear that throughout our discussion because it's very important to us to address the facts and circumstances pertaining to smaller firms. Since 2022, the board has adopted 5 standards or amendments to standards and 2 rulemaking processes or projects. Further, tomorrow, I think as I chatted with a couple of you on the way in this morning, the board is scheduled to have an open meeting to vote on 2 additional rulemaking projects: firm and engagement metrics and firm reporting. The board set out to modernize the interim audit standards and has consistently delivered. Scalability has been part of that rulemaking process every step of the way. It has been an area that I personally have focused on and encouraged staff to be mindful throughout our oversight process. After considering commenter perspective and engaging in rigorous economic analysis, we have made adjustments to our proposed rules and standards where appropriate. In other words, we listen to the best that we can in terms of comments. With the adoption of QC 1000, quality control, this board accomplished a very revolutionary change in quality control standards in response to the evolution of audit firms. It was no small feat. When this board arrived, we did not start with a blank sheet of paper. And what I mean by that, this standard in some form was under development for over 14 years. It was contemplated in at least 3 separate advisory group meetings: 2010, 2014, 2018. The board issued a concept release in 2019, released a proposal in 2022, and adopted the final standard in 2024. The timeline for this project allowed our staff to thoughtfully consider comments received, including 79 comment letters in the aggregate on the concept release and the 22 proposal. I would highlight that approximately 20% of the comment letters were received from non-affiliate firms. The final adopting release was built on a foundation of prior staff work, including input from the comment letter process. It includes an evaluation of the impact on the profession. As a result, we landed with a risk-based framework, which includes consideration of risk associated with the size of the firm. As I said in my statement in support of this standard, and I quote, "Building in a risk-based framework to the nucleus of this standard is critical to reflect ever-changing environment, the associated risk in which registered firms operate." The staff further scaled the requirements such that firms with 5 or fewer engagements are not required to perform monitoring of a PCOB engagement every year. Additionally, certain incremental requirements under QC 1000 only required for larger firms, including the required monitoring of in-process engagements. This reduces the burden for smaller firms with less complex systems of quality control. For our rulemaking projects, auditors of all sizes can submit comment letters, which are evaluated by the PCOB. These engagements can directly impact our rulemaking process. Our focus on getting it right in our standards includes scalability, supports the vital contributions of small audit firms, ensuring that they remain a cornerstone of economic stability and prosperity. I continue to encourage our staff to incorporate scalability in our process. These 3 steps support our objective to have regular and meaningful dialogue with auditors of smaller public companies, broker-dealers, one of our important stakeholders. At the onset of our strategic planning process, I was clear that our strategic plan would not sit on a shelf and collect dust, but that it would tangibly drive our daily operations and decisions to support our mission of investor protection. By expanding direct engagement, increasing delivery of useful guidance, and incorporating scalability throughout the rulemaking process, we recognize the importance of auditors across U.S. capital markets. Audit firms of small public companies and broker-dealers are more than service providers. They are catalysts of growth, guardians of financial integrity, and champions of local economies. By supporting small businesses, driving competition, prompting transparency, these firms are essential to the health and vibrancy of the U.S. capital markets. Almost at the end. I just want to thank you all for being here today. I'm going to obviously go over and we're going to do a little chat here with some Q&A and everything, but I'm definitely looking forward to the engagement. But I'd be remiss if I did not thank the staff that'll be here for the rest of the day. So looking forward to, and I'm sure you are as well, receiving an update from our Office of Chief Auditor and the Division of Enforcement and Investigations. And as Kent mentioned, we're also looking forward to hearing from the SEC and FINRA, who will also update us on matters within their purview. I think it goes without saying, today's session and engagement will be very, very rich, and looking forward to it. So, Kent, are we ready?
Yeah, come on down. Just grab this from you.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, and Tony, thank you for that. Before we get into Q&A, and we'll kick some things off, questions, Tony, that I've got for you, and then feel free, of course, folks, to roll in your questions, and we'll do this however you want. We've got about 25 minutes, so looking forward to that. Before we begin, however, I just want to share the CPE code for this session. The first one is 937. 937. Okay. Well, Tony, again, thank you, and thank you for the remarks. I know always interested in hearing your perspectives, not the least of which reasons is you bring such a unique perspective to the board. I mean, you served senior roles at the CFTC, USDA after a impressive and long career in the Air Force. So I just, because there's such a diversity of views on the board and backgrounds on the board, as part of that is contemplated by Sarbanes-Oxley and the way the board is structured, but also the way that the SEC has instituted the current board. I just thought it'd be interesting to hear of what your background brings to your perspective and how it's helped shape your views as a board member at the PCOB.
Thank you, Kent. Like many of you, I think the first thing I would say is that, you look back over your career and you probably would say to yourself, there's no way I would have ever thought I'd be here, sitting here in front of you, because that wasn't my, roadmap or whatever getting here. But being able to draw from those experiences, I think, has helped me tremendously as a board member. I enlisted in the Air Force very young enough where my mother had to sign for me to go. And, I spent most of my adult life, in an environment that's very mission-focused. It's very principled in terms of its core values. I mean, I remember them today, integrity, service before self, excellence in all we do. And those values, being instilled at a very, formative time in my professional life has carried me through my roles and senior roles at leaving the Air Force, going into USDA in terms of the food inspection, regimen mission that they have, and then leaving there and going into Commodities Future Trade Commission in terms of their mission of the derivatives and what that impact has on the capital market, especially coming after the 2008 financial crisis, which, as we know, was based upon subprimes, which were based on, to a large extent, how derivatives were used without exchanges or being able to verify, what, the seller, the buyer, or whatnot in terms of that arrangement. And then, of course, finding myself here at the board where we are very, focused in terms of doing the right thing for the capital markets, but also, as I talked throughout my remarks, talking about the guidance that we provide. It's not just promoting standards, putting standards out there, but being able to teach and mentor how to use those standards as we go forward. So again, I think that has helped me tremendously, being at this point in this place in my career.
No,
or what's left of it.
Yeah, no, it's it's great. It's,
Yeah.
hopefully you'll have a long career
Yeah.
ahead of you. But I mean, it's interesting to me just because you're right. I mean, all the different stops you've been at, including the armed forces, are mission driven.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's very clear, being at the PCOB, our mission is, it's very clear. It was given to us by Congress. Our mission is to protect investors. So
Sure.
again, whether it's no matter what it is, it's just having a focus on that makes your job, not your job, our job a lot easier,
Yes,
because it's
yes.
not, there's no question about what the mission is, and it's
Sure.
nice to have that sort of as your North Star.
Yes.
Let me just do this again before we get going. I've got a couple other questions I know that I have for Tony, and I see that a few are already coming in, which is great. And the CPE code, before I do that, is 966. 966. Okay, so I guess
Okay.
the next thing I think it'd be helpful for folks. You talked about your time here on the board, and one of the things that struck me when you first got here was how hands-on you were, given your background, with our strategic plan and setting up the strategic plan from which our budget flows and everything else. And looking back now, since this board has been constituted, it's amazing to see how much has already been accomplished in execution of the plan that you spent so much
Sure.
time on from day one. So, looking back on sort of the things that the board has already accomplished, what are some of the things that stand out to you, either that you're particularly proud of or just sort of strike you as you look back? And because it's easy for everything to get lost in the shuffle because so much work has been done.
Sure. I always like going from big to small and, understanding the big picture. So I would think that, coming in as new board members, it was pretty clear what the big picture was. The big picture was, having an organization, and when you look at the number of standards and the things that had been done over the period since standing up the PCOB, there were a lot of interim standards that pretty much had been inherited from the AICP standards of 1988, which we came along 2003, and we basically just adopted those standards. So clearly, in anybody's world, you probably don't want to be operating on something that not only is probably circa 2000, but more likely circa 1988. So that was clear. So putting a strategic plan around, that whole big picture in terms of where do you go forward, looking at, how do you enhance inspection? How do you modernize standards? Looking at enforcement, how do you strengthen enforcement? And the thing I focus on, because of the leadership opportunities I've had over my career, really focus on how can you do all this and also take care of the people who are going to be doing the work. And so all of that in terms of our organizational effectiveness was put on the table. And I think, as I said, with my experience in the Air Force, the strategic plan, defense planning guidance, I was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff doing planning. So I'm a process-driven person that if you get the team, you give clear vision on the process, then it will happen. And so I think that's the mindset that the board took moving forward, is that if we give clear guidance to the profession, give clear guidance to our staff, that those four things, those four goals, would happen, and they would happen, over time. I've been amazed. I can remember my first discussions with the staff when we talked about doing all this, and there was a lot of consternation internal, but also, as you know, from the profession, external in terms of what we were embarking upon doing. And I think to the extent that we thought through most of the things, I think we've landed in a good place. A couple of examples would be, AS 1000 that SEC has just approved, along with QC 1000. QC 1000 was huge,
yeah.
And it's still huge because it needs to be, implemented at some point. When I talk to firms, one of the questions I ask them is, resource-wise, other considerations, what are we doing in terms of implementing that system, changing a firm's quality control design. And back to that word scalability, we realize that for small firms, it's not the same as it would be for a large GNF, a global network firm. So how does that impact? So there are some waivers there in terms of expectations from GNF firms to smaller firms in that operation. I think back to interim standards have been sitting on the shelf. When I talk to inspectors, they always tell me their true center of gravity, their North Star, is that they focus on inspecting to the standard. So, whoa, that hit me hard when I was out on an inspection, and I just asked this, the complexity, talking to the firm, all the back and forth in terms of getting to what comment forms you're going to issue, what discrepancies are you going to write up as a Part 1A, a Part 2, and all that. And the very simplified statement was inspect to the standard. So if you are having inspectors inspect to the standards, you definitely want them to be updated to think about technology. Has technology changed in the last 20 years? Of course it has. Has business practices changed in the last 20 years? Of course it has. Has firm culture changed in the last 20 years? Of course it has. So those are the things in AS 1000 in terms of going back to the basic responsibilities of an auditor and being able to look at those things in that context that I thought were must-dos. And I know they're big lists, but I think they'll carry us forward, and I think we've delivered on it. A couple other areas, enforcement. You probably hear about some of the enforcement cases and whatnot. My personal view on enforcement is that in any environment you have to have deterrence. And I talked about my professional life, in terms of 32 years in the Air Force. That's deterrence. We don't have problems because, it's deterrence. So I think in any microcosm, you will always have to expect, and we do, auditors to basically be the gatekeepers for the function that they have purview over. But any microcosm, you're going to have situations where things don't go as planned, and when we inspect, we find things. And many of those things, unfortunately, are very egregious. And so the enforcement aspect of what we do certainly has to be and was enforced and enhanced. So one of the things that I want to end on that question is organizational effectiveness. Firms, we have to think about our people. We have to think about pace, tempo in these 6 standards and these 2 rules that we promulgated over the last 2.5 years, as well as those that are going to come. And think about how do we do that and keep morale high and have a delivery platform where you can actually do what you say you're going to do. And I thought that was very important. We've had various programs to be able to do that, namely the budget, and that's one of the things I talked to staff about, because I think they were very concerned, because if you ask people to do things, you need to provide the resources. And to the extent possible, that's one of the things that we're going to vote on tomorrow. The board is the 2025 budget. So it's 3 items on the agenda for the open meeting tomorrow. I gave you the first 2. The third is the 2025 budget. And my background, I don't know if you read my bio, but that was the last job I had in the Air Force, was Director of Air Force Budget Program. My job was to integrate the entire Air Force budget, the communications behind it, the numbers, the storyboard, in terms of convincing Congress that we needed what we needed as a service to be able to perform the mission of fly, fight, and win. So having said that, budgets are very important to me. That's in my DNA, and hopefully that's something I've been able to bring to the board in terms of being able to articulate the requirement, what is needed, and the impact if things don't happen in terms of providing the resources.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I can speak obviously personally to the board's efforts to improve the employee experience, and it's been appreciated. And again, I think that, it's not important from the auditor's perspective or investor's perspective, like how my life is when I'm at the office, right? But the important thing is the efforts that the board has undertaken to improve that work experience just makes it easier for us to do our jobs to protect investors.
Absolutely.
Right, and so I think the improvements of folks coming to the PCOB and working have been noticeable. I think that would come across in any kind of internal survey of staff. But the importance for those outside the building isn't our staff's well-being, it's the fact that we can now be more focused on what we were hired to do, and that is to execute on the mission of protecting investors and what the board has laid out. So it's been noticeable to me. It's appreciated by me and the 900 folks who work at the PCOB, but it's important for other reasons as well. So in any event, that's all I can share with that personally. I see some questions coming in, which is great, and at least one of them is one I wanted to cover as well, knowing that folks will be interested. But before we get to those, the next CPE code for this session is 704. 704. Okay, well, one of the ones that I want to cover that has come in, and I know it's something that you're interested in addressing as well, excuse me, is that one of the issues of particular interest to at least one large section of this audience and those who are joining us virtually are the auditors of certain SEC, easy for me to say, certain SEC registered broker-dealers, is the status of a potential permanent inspections program for broker-dealer auditors. So could you provide an update on that from your perspective as a board member?
Sure, I sure can. And one thing I can share that probably in the last two engagements over the last couple of years with broker-dealers and small businesses, I actually went on a broker-dealer inspection here in the last few months. And one of the things I try to do, if you're going to make decisions on things, you got to know what's happening on the ground. And so, as challenging those are normally 2-week inspections. I'm normally able to carve out the first week and spend with the inspection team when they're on the ground. And just the dynamics of watching what happens between the teams and the firms, you can't get that lesson any place but being on the ground. So in years past, I've been able to say how effective the broker-dealer program is as an interim, 4200T program, T temporary. And it's something that if I had purview, I think it should be viewed as a permanent program. It's that effective in terms of moving forward. No movement in the interim in terms of making it permanent, but it's probably one of the, if I can say, it has to be the most effective temporary program I think I've ever come across in my professional life. So more to come. Yeah. Maybe I'll be saying something different, or we'll be saying something different next year. But right now, that's the status.
Yeah, and we'll be hearing from our broker-dealer team from DRI later this afternoon as well on it. But in any event, I know that's going to be of interest to folks, or would have been of interest to folks. And actually, I'm not multitasking. This is how I see what questions are coming in. So please don't take offense as I look through here as well. Another one that has come in, which I know folks would benefit from your perspective, would be, but before I do that, the next CPE code, and this is the final CPE code for the session, so you have to promise you're going to keep paying attention after I give you this last CPE code, and that is 691. And again, the fourth and final CPE code for this session is 691. Okay. What are the boards, so let's just say what are board member Tony Thompson's thoughts, not speaking for the board, but speaking individually as you laid out at the outset. What are your thoughts on the issue of private equity ownership of accounting firms?
Well, first off, I say I'm smarter today than I was a year ago when I was meeting with a group of audit committee members, and they said, "What are your thoughts on private equity?" And, I generically know what that is and how it works, but not in the context of private equity investing in the non-assurance or the non-audit side of, the firms and, funding different aspects, whether they're pension funds or whatever, and how that looks from a regulator moving forward. I'm glad to say that I'm a little smarter based upon engagements of late. Our CAG did a discussion, or had a discussion. Also, our International Forum of Independent Auditors, which is our jurisdiction around the world, 30 jurisdictions, that was a focal point. And really the takeaway is that it's kind of a wait and see. You shouldn't score something, or you shouldn't grade something until you know what it is and the impact. And so when you talk to the firms, obviously that was the splash with Grant Thornton and Baker Tilly and others who have made those decisions. But really from our focal point, from a PCOB, is the key thread is independence. And so we are setting up a group led by board member George Bodick that will be looking into the private equity trends and developments over time. So one of the things that this board, we don't want to be backwards looking. And so part of our focal point, again, big picture, is to be forward looking. So before, you remember the banking issue we had, a couple years ago, we really want to be in a place where before it's a challenge or before it's problematic in terms of auditor firm independence, we really want to be on the forefront of that, and that's what this group that will be led by George Bodick will take a look at, moving forward. So on our radar, will remain on our radar, and right now, if you talk to each firm, which we have all the 6 GNF firms, we've had a chance to, as a board, talk to them about this issue. Right now, the word is, not an issue at this point in time based upon their framework and auditor independence.
Great, thank you for that. Another one going through, I see that there are some coming in which, I apologize, we will probably save for our colleagues in inspections and from our Office of the Chief Auditor during their presentation, perhaps better answered by my colleagues in that office. But here is a good one for Board Member Thompson, is what are the challenges that you see, the biggest challenge facing students who are considering the profession today?
Well, I will start off by saying I think the board collectively has invested considerable time, getting out to colleges and other venues to talk to students, talk to faculty, get a sense. When this issue was first raised, and it's been around a while, but I think it kind of hit critical mass maybe about a year and a half ago. And you see the articles, you see the various reasons why those who opine say that we're having, a pipeline issue with accountant students and whatnot. So since that time, the board, each one of us has probably visited over 15 in the last year, probably 15 colleges and universities, talking to faculty, talking to students. I've heard, different reasons, salaries being the challenge, the 150-hour, CPE requirement, to get your CPA. All of those things, have been, discussed ad nauseum, with students. But also, so again, I always go from big to small. Look at the size of the pool, Gen Z, the smallest demographic generationally in terms of, in the history. I mean, obviously you got builders, you got boomers. Boomers are huge. Millennials, they're fairly good sized, Gen X. So everybody's fighting for a reduced number of people in the 18 to 25, age range for jobs. That's the military. Everybody's looking at that same small pool. So I looked at that first. The second thing I looked at was what is, by asking the students, your biggest concern? And everything I've gotten back in terms of feedback is that the salary seems to be the biggest issue. Especially if you live in a high cost area and someone is offering you $62,000, $65,000 a year. You may, in your earlier time in your business school experience, decide to do something else, finance, marketing, or whatever. And so that's a competitive, part of the process. And I understand, I've spoken in forums and I've heard people say, oh, but it's getting better. I say, well, maybe for your school, but statistically, it's still a problem. And I think that everybody in this room who has this background, should really advocate for what a great career, you can have in auditing and accounting, and what the language of business, so to speak. I mean, that's when I enlisted in the Air Force, that's what I did. They put me in a room and I did, trial balances and general ledgers. That's what I did my first, few years. And so, but you have to learn at some point in time how to explain to people who are decision makers how the numbers work and everything, and that's an art. And it's a very lucrative art in terms of how you may land in a business. And so those are the type of things that I encourage and talk to students as well as faculty. But I do think it's a challenge, and I think because of the generational issue and the competitive nature of that pool, that it's not something that we can back off on or not maybe even increase our efforts in that area.
Great. Well, thank you. I did notice one that, and if the person is here, I'm happy to chat with you. We're going to keep on time here.
Oh, there is one thing we need to talk about.
Absolutely.
I would be remiss if I didn't announce the thing that many people are thinking about, and that's non-compliance with laws and regs, that standard. And you may have read in our press release last week that we're going to, PCOB, in terms of moving that forward for 2024, is going to push that into 2025, and obviously in consult with more comments. We've had roundtables back in April of this year. If anybody tracking, we actually proposed that rule in June of 2023, but it has a potentially profound impact on the profession. And so in consult with SCC in the coming year, more to come, but you'll probably see it out there on our agenda. But again, just giving you some backdrop in terms of where that's headed, in case anybody was interested.
I'm sure they were, so thank you for that. Excuse me, I was just going to say, I saw one question come through around the Scholars Program. My office, obviously, is subject to the views of the board, as if anything, we handle the execution of that program. So if I saw one come through, I'm around. If you want to ask me, my colleague Brian in the bow tie, he's always easy to find. I'm happy to talk about that, but I didn't want that to get lost in the shuffle because it's probably not going to be addressed by any of my colleagues. We moved some of the questions on inspections or standards specifically to our colleagues who will be presenting on those later, so they'll have an opportunity to look at those as well. But I love Tony, the fact that he's military, he likes to stay on time, and we're almost there. I like to stay on time as well. So with that, I just wanted to thank you for the time you spent with us here today. And I think you're going to be here a little bit, maybe,
yes,
before you need to head back in preparation for tomorrow's board meeting. But so you'll have an opportunity to catch him on a break. But in any event, thank you very much. Next up will be our presentation by our Division of Registration Inspections related to issuers. So what our jargon for businesses, so specifically small businesses. So we're going to do a little stage handing to get that set up. But Board Member Thompson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.